I stopped at a gas station the other day, and I parked to go in and pick up like a Monster Energy drink, something. And as I was getting out of my car, there was a woman kind of trying to get into her car. And I stepped out of my car. I was like, "Oh, good morning." And she gave me this look. She went, and then she just like ducked into her car. And I was like, holy shit. My beard has gotten to the point where like I officially scare women with it.
That's funny.
Are you wearing a thing?
A turban? No, I wasn't wearing my turban. I wasn't wearing my turban out.
But what you're wearing right now makes me think Muslim.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, the beard and the yeah.
But that's not really what we're here to talk about today. Today we're here to talk about films. This is Dr. Film's Psychedelic Mustache Review Emporium. I'm one of your hosts, Stephen Bennett.
And I'm Matt Canella.
And like I said, we're here to talk about some short films. We got kind of another weird episode for you guys today because Matt and we went and saw all the Academy Award nominated short films for the 2014 Academy Awards.
Sans the documentary shorts.
Sans the documentary shorts, which I'm kind of disappointed about because I really like documentary filmmaking.
I don't.
You don't? You son of a bitch.
No, I'm not really a fan.
So let's just start out with the live action shorts. That seems like a logical place to begin. Was there one that really stuck out to you that you enjoyed?
Yeah, the French film Just Before Losing Everything was about a wife escaping from her abusive husband with her 2 children in tow. It had such a unique style. It was able to breathe when it needed to breathe. It kept me guessing throughout and didn't have a lot of, it was more show, not tell.
Yeah, this was the film that I really enjoyed from the whole bunch that we saw as well. One of the issues I have with a lot of short films is I feel like the filmmakers, they feel this necessity to communicate a lot of information in a short period of time. I mean, you only have 5, 10, 15, 30 minutes, whatever it is, to tell an entire story. And I think a lot of filmmakers are then pushed to just tell you information. Just here's the information, here's the information, here's the information. And this is a movie that I really appreciated because it held a lot of information back. A lot of the times when you're watching this film, characters are aware of the situation, but you as an audience member aren't. And it leaves a little bit of mystery that just kind of carries you through that whole film. It was spectacular.
Yeah, I mean, it almost seems to come from the children's perspective, or maybe even more removed than that. It's not necessarily the protagonist. We're almost outside of her perspective to a little bit more omniscient view where we're watching it unfold in the middle. And that's a great way to start short films. Keep the tension high right from the middle, and feel like you want the audience to reconcile why we're here at this moment.
There's also some really great scenes in this film that you can go back and either rewatch and pick up on some of the themes, some of the topics of the film, or you can just sort of think back on them. But you and I both really like the scene where the kid is under the bridge and he puts like 3 little stones on a twig and sets it out to the middle of the river and then crushes it with a rock. And that's one of those scenes that once you figure out what's going on in the film is more than just a kid playing with sticks and stones.
You realize it's a foreshadowing, or maybe a recollection of the past, and it's foreshadowing what we will eventually learn.
Yeah, or it could even be interpreted as perhaps a symptom of what's going on in this kid's home. There's a lot to enjoy about this movie. I don't want to take up our whole time talking about this one.
Well, I think it's a good way to segue into another one that to me started in the middle, or at this point where we usually think is a good place to start but isn't. Do I have to do everything?
Yeah, it was a weird one. So this is the Finnish film about a family scrambling to get ready to go to a wedding.
Which starts right with the classic alarm clock, waking them up, and it's time to go and get the day started. What do you think about this film?
This film is one of those films where I asked myself, how did this one get nominated? And that's not necessarily a bad thing to be asking myself. It just seemed very much like a film school student's first attempt at a short film, because you have certain tropes in there like an alarm clock going off at the beginning of the movie to wake these characters up, or things like, whoops, it's the wrong day of the week, we didn't realize. To me, those are very film school student things that I'm guilty of in my films when I was in film school as well.
Yeah, this Finnish one, that's pretty much how it goes, is they wake up late for going to a wedding, hilarity ensues, it turns out it was the wrong day. Like a short, simple idea, but there's nothing there. That's it, but that's really it for me.
Well, so I come back to my initial question of why did this movie get nominated? Do you think it was perhaps because a lot of those humorous elements landed so well? Because when we saw this in the theater, people were cracking up at this movie.
Yeah, but I can't imagine that there wasn't anything else funny out there. I'm not really quite sure what the selection process is, but this one to me just seemed like there had to have been something better.
Yeah. See, that kind of brings me to another film that we saw, which is That Wasn't Me, which is the Spanish film about the child soldiers in Africa. That's the movie that I'm kind of surprised is nominated.
It definitely seemed like it had a big budget, which might have lent to that. There was a lot of tanks, guns, explosions, and they had a lot of that and not enough heart for me to really enjoy this one.
Yeah, I felt the exact same way, because I thought the movie sort of beat you over the head with the topics that it was trying to cover. I thought it was kind of cheesy with some of like the special effects and animation that they used in the film. And yeah, it was just because they tried to make it sort of an action film, it lost a lot of those emotional elements that should have really been disturbing me, because it's a film about child soldiers. It's like probably one of the saddest things that goes on in the world today.
Yeah, and the style of humanizing it was kind of telling it from this past perspective of I finally got out and I realized how wrong it all was. But they didn't focus enough on that and just left, and it was a little muddled in its idea, its execution of that future self looking back on the past and recognizing the hell that they're in there. But there was one humanizing element at the beginning where they're going through the barricade and the guy gives them the soccer cards, but that was about it.
Yeah.
And I would have liked to seen a little bit more than that, and it did feel like it was beating me over the head.
Yeah, this might be a movie that's a victim of its own budget. You know what I mean? Like if you give someone $10 million to make a short film, they're gonna go spend $10 million. And this might be one that was better suited to just have like $1 million budget. How do you tell this story with only $1 million?
And sometimes
it might have forced them to be more imaginative.
The constraints are what really make short film interesting.
Yeah.
Whereas this one didn't seem like they had such a large budget, that there wasn't as much constraints except for time.
That's definitely an interesting topic that we'll have to discuss further another time, because we got to move on to another film. Let's talk about Helium, which is the story of a little Norwegian kid who's dying in a hospital and befriends the janitor of that hospital, who kind of tells him tales of this alternate heaven that he's going to be going to.
And he kind of offers him this tale to comfort him and maybe give him another vision of what the afterlife, if any exists, is there for him. And I appreciated it. It was interesting, the idea of building one's own heaven. Whether or not that exists fully in your own mind here, or does that physically exist somewhere else. And so there were some nice parts, a little cheesy, a little sappy.
Yeah, well, they chose the topic of a child dying, which, while very emotional, kind of seems like an easy way to evoke a response from an audience.
It seems like, you didn't like this movie. Where's your heart?
Yeah, and it's like, so it's not a knock against them. It is just, in a way, it kind of seems like an easy way out. I don't know. That's me kind of nitpicking. This movie relied heavily on some computer animated parts. What did that do for you?
It's interesting, but overall to me, the aesthetic of Helium, it's nice to kind of see this fantasy, this what dreams may come-esque vision of the afterlife. But overall, it almost would have been more interesting to not see Helium and to have it be just purely you're in the shoes of this child imagining what it's like, rather than having to see all of it.
Yeah, we talked a little bit about this, about how short films can kind of be a calling card or a business card for the filmmakers. So I kind of looked at that as someone trying to express their capabilities as a filmmaker.
I think it could have done without it. Maybe it's not enhanced for me, let's say, by seeing those things. Maybe it is for other producers that say, let's pick this guy up. And he did a really well job at it, but it just wasn't my cup of tea.
So moving on, let's talk about the Vorman Problem, which is the British film starring Martin Freeman, who seems to be in everything these days.
Yeah, I really like him.
And he's a psychiatrist who goes into a prison to interview a patient, a prisoner.
They have this problem of Mr. Vorman, who seems to be riling up the prisoners with some radical psychological ideas.
So what's the problem with him? What's the Vorman problem?
Well, the problem seems to be, at first I thought it was very like representational. There's people in a prison and they don't know how long they're going to be there. They lose the records, and it kind of, at first it reminded me of, well, maybe that's where I'm at. I'm in the physical world. I don't know how long I'm going to be there. And his idea, Vorman's idea, is I am the god of my own universe. But to me, this was the most philosophical of all of the shorts we saw. That to me was getting across an idea that the others maybe didn't totally hinge on.
Yeah, so this one to me seemed like it was trying to take a complex idea, this idea of solipsism in a way. I mean, there's some other things going on there, but that's the idea that I really latched onto from this film, and making it kind of bite-sized for an audience. It's not something that I could see being made into a feature film. It's a short film, and it's just trying to communicate one small, quote-unquote, simple idea to an audience and kind of put you in this person's shoes. I thought it was really effective. I liked this one a lot. It had elements of humor. It had some elements of fantasy to it. It was fun.
Yeah, I think this is what I like out of short films. It's short, simple, sweet, has an idea. Sometimes the twist is too cheesy. In this case, it really wasn't for me. I don't always like seeing that twist, and that's what usually turns me off, but this one worked.
Dude, I guess we probably don't really have too much more to say on that film. And that's all the live action films. We've covered them all. Let's move on to the animated shorts that we saw. What did you think of the animated shorts?
I'm always excited for the animated shorts. To me, surrealism now lives in animation. We don't get it a ton in a lot of live action films, so I love seeing that here. And we had some good picks. The one that people might be most familiar was at the front end of Frozen for this year, which was Don't Buy a Horse. Don't buy me a horse.
Go buy a horse.
Go buy a horse.
Go buy a horse.
Get a horse.
Get a horse, motherfucker.
It was kind of interesting that it went back and forth from the old style of animation where Mickey Mouse has been to now the 3D. So I think a lot of people saw that, and in 3D as well. And it's just kind of a fun tale that makes you think about the history of animation.
Yeah, it is cool to see that the span of where cartoons started and where they are now, sort of captured in this short film. And it's always good to see Mickey Mouse back for a little bit. I feel like we don't see that fucking rodent around very much anymore.
Yeah, he's the star of animation, and he's where it kind of took off. I love watching old Disney animateds. I mean, they're so surreal to me, with things changing into other things, and that is present in this one as well.
There's, when you look at old cartoons, I feel like a lot of them relied very heavily on things like comedic timing that we've been able to move away from in some senses, because now we can create very lush, very visually stimulating animated films. And I was happy to see that this movie went back to like jokes a mile a minute, and everything happened very quickly, and it was very precisely timed out, and there was some very funny action going on the screen. It really felt like a harkening back to like the old Wile E. Coyote, Roadrunner kinds of cartoons that I grew up watching. Was there an animated film that really stuck out for you that you enjoyed, perhaps above all the rest?
Yeah, I really liked Feral, which was kind of an interesting take about a child who's a feral sort of creature raised by wolves and is reintegrated into society.
I liked Feral. I didn't love it. I really enjoyed the art style of this one, and I can appreciate that there was a lot of imagery in this one, that it wasn't necessarily trying to tell a quote unquote story in the traditional sense. But I felt like there were definitely some themes that the filmmaker was trying to get across to me as an audience member that I don't feel like were fully explored. When you get to like about the middle of the film, there's this weird Nazi imagery that sort of pops up for me out of nowhere. And I just wanted something a little bit more in the film to help guide me on to what the filmmaker was trying to get me to understand in that one.
Yeah, I didn't really get the Nazi read, but it seemed like, towards the end, it started to open itself up to a personal interpretation, that it wasn't laying the cards out so much anymore.
Yeah.
And sometimes I like that it's challenging me to go that extra internalness of what does the film mean to me, and where does my own feral nature reside, and how is that reconciled in society?
Yeah, and did we talk about the unique art style on this one? I feel like even if we did, we can't say enough about it, because for me, the art style is what really carried me through the film, that sort of painterly
It's odd that it's
style.
refreshing that it's almost just not the Pixar typical look that almost all of the dominating box office hits are utilizing.
Yeah, I would like to see more modern animated films diverge in a way that this film did.
Yeah, I think there's just a lot of room for animation, and there's no boundaries, and I feel like it's been limited recently with not as much surreal elements, that it's just anthropomorphizing creatures who talk and they go about their business, and it's not really creating something that is surprising in anything can happen sort of way.
I was also really happy to see a Japanese animated short film in here, Possessions, which is the story of a Japanese repairman who gets stuck in like a shed during a storm, and the different items in the shed take on a life, and he's sort of invited to repair them to escape this dream world that he's in.
Yeah, it's really just kind of a fun, traditional type story that we have these possessions that are almost literally possessed, right? And they take on a life of their own and challenge him to use his abilities to repair them.
And I'm a big fan of Japanese anime, but I wasn't necessarily blown away by the animation style that they chose for this film. What they did is they took on kind of a cel-shaded / computer animated protagonist that didn't really work for me. But that aside, I like to see the Japanese mythology work its way into the film, because it's sort of a perspective that we don't get here in the United States very often.
Yeah, we're not really used to the idea of inanimate objects sort of having a soul that resides with him, then that tricks people, as it kind of posits at the beginning of this one. So I think it's interesting to get that idea across to a wider audience.
Also, it was fun. There were some sing-song moments, there were some scary moments. It sort of covered a wide range of emotions throughout the film that was very pleasing to watch.
Yeah, and I also feel like you don't always have to have no dialogue, which I enjoyed about Feral and Mr. Hublot. This one had minimal, so it was part of the story and it progressed it, but it wasn't spelling it out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so did you have a favorite out of the animated ones?
I did have a favorite from the animated shorts. My favorite was Mr. Hublot, which is the quirky tale of an obsessive-compulsive robot who adopts a little robot dog. It was great. It was very funny.
Yeah, I mean, I really enjoy this one, like Feral, in the sense that they both were devoid of conversation. That they were all utilizing a show don't tell method of telling a story.
And while this one was done in sort of a more childlike, a more child-friendly animation style, very Pixar-like, I was happy to see that it in some small way addressed a very adult topic like obsessive-compulsive disorder, which is something I think is kind of difficult to accomplish on screen. But by about the midway point in this film, I started feeling obsessive-compulsive myself.
Yeah, I mean, I feel for him because I've never had to flick the light switch 3 times, but I like all my things nice and neat and straight, and I find comfort in that. And it kind of beckons the idea that maybe sometimes something unexpected can come into your life that allows you to grow and be more accepting of making a little bit of a mess or expanding your horizons a bit more.
This one was kind of heartwarming. And I think in that sense, you kind of know what to expect as you're watching this one. It doesn't really throw a huge curveball at you. I think there's a moment where they kind of do. And I think that got an audible response from the audience as we were watching. I mean, I'm not going to spoil anything, but you kind of know what to expect with a film like this, which in some cases is I kind of like.
Yeah.
This one was obviously aimed more at children, so I wasn't expecting them to have anything too terrible happen in this movie.
Right.
Let's move on to another animated film that I can't remember the name of.
Room on the Broom.
Room on the Broom. You hated this one.
I hated this one.
Why do you hate childlike whimsy so much?
I really enjoyed The Gruffalo, which was another Oscar short from a few years ago that was the same studio. But this one, I didn't really like the story. It was repetitive to me. It was long. I don't really love the super polished look of it. And I just felt like I've seen this before, or I would have rather read the children's book.
Yeah, and this one, I didn't hate it. I did like this one. It was repetitive, I will give you that. I thought it ran a little bit long. You can even hear in some of the dialogue delivery of this film, there's large spaces of silence between rhyming words that just accentuate the length of this film. But I thought it was a good adaptation of the children's story, and I imagine that kids would probably love seeing this movie.
I can't agree with you more that children would probably love this film, but to me, it didn't really add anything or have like a substantial story that was different than other children's tales. I didn't really like it. I don't like that I'm ripping on a children's film.
Fuck kids.
But it was too long most of the time.
I did like the art style in this one. It had kind of a pseudo stop motion claymation kind of feel to it that I did connect with. I don't know. That's just me.
I don't know. I can't really pinpoint exactly, but it just wasn't my cup of tea.
No, I mean, like I can see your points about the film. I don't disagree with the things that you said necessarily. So I guess it just maybe comes down to, I don't know what it comes down to.
It's personal taste.
Personal taste. It seems like such a cop-out. All right, so it sounds like we basically said everything we wanted to say about all these shorts. No Volkswagen buses this week. Yeah. I feel 2 weeks in a row without giving out Volkswagen buses.
Really
I feel weird.
Changing it up. Yeah.
Well, did you want to try and to close this one out?
I'll see what I can do.
Give it a try.
So that's going to do it for this week's episode of Dr. Film's Psychedelic Mustache Review Emporium. Until next time, take care.
Thanks for watching, guys.